Okay, hello and welcome everyone. So in this video, I'm going to give an introduction to the Economics of Entrepreneurship course, Econ 490. All right, so our overarching goal for the course is to take the ideas from economics that you've gained so far and to apply it to the idea of starting a business. So the whole point is to say, hey, we've done a lot of interesting things. Maybe you've come out of Econ 401 or some of the other courses. We've got all these cool tools. And the question now is, well, how can we apply these tools in this kind of new, interesting way? So in particular, we're interested in applying what we have learned in previous economics classes to the study of starting and running a new business or expanding some existing business. In terms of entrepreneurship, and at the very outset, I want to be clear about the fact that the title, the course, Economics of Entrepreneurship, must be much more heavily on the economics than on the entrepreneurship. The reality is this is an applied economics course, right? It's applied economics, and we are applying economics to the idea of entrepreneurship. So it is not an entrepreneurship course. It's very different than what you'd find in Ross School of Business. And those courses are interesting to take as well. This is an economics course, and the idea is our subject matter, what we're trying to arrange our tools around is the idea of launching a new business. And so, yeah, entrepreneurship is the focus of the course, but the tools are economics, and the analysis is coming from economics. All right, so by entrepreneurship, we mean the act of starting, organizing, managing a business. And there's a lot of different aspects. I mean, it's necessarily interdisciplinary, and there's a lot of different things that fall under the umbrella of entrepreneurship. I mean, it involves like technology and product development, and there's applications of economics there. We'll see that in the first couple of lectures. There's applications to managing people, thinking about how to incentivize workers to work hard, how to avoid moral hazard. There's aspects of strategic decision making, especially since we're thinking about a situation where we've got firms with market power, and there might be a couple of firms with market power. So maybe we have an oligopoly, and now your decision making is going to be relevant to what your rivals are going to, how your rivals are going to respond. Understanding one's own operating environment and interpreting new information and data. I won't do a whole lot with data here, but one of the things that I will do is I'll show how you could back out a demand curve, at least in principle, from data and like where this would actually come from. So we're not going to rest a whole lot on the econometrics that you'd have from other courses. However, I'll show like one of the places where it would be useful, or a couple of the places where it would be useful. Like I said, entrepreneurship is necessarily interdisciplinary. And so we've got a lot of different academic disciplines. I mean, obviously like natural science and math, probably generating a lot of the innovations. Thinking about psychology from the standpoint of like product development and design and finding a niche and coming up with products that are positioned interestingly to really resonate with consumers. Certainly sociology, and then obviously economics. And then there's much more theoretical disciplines that are given rise to some of these things that are also relevant. So things like engineering, computer science, especially with app development, and then business for sure, from the standpoint of thinking about managerial innovation. So specific to this course, like what are we seeking to do? I mean, for sure, this is an applied economics course with our subject matter of interest being entrepreneurship, but there are aspects of economics useful. I mean, there's a point to the class, which is like, well, we want to understand the incentives that are facing manager, facing workers, facing consumers. So there's applications of microeconomic theory there. Optimal decision making, obviously another application of micro theory. Strategic thinking gives us applications of game theory. So we'll cover aspects of game theory in the course. And then data analysis, which rests on econometrics. I'll show you where there's applications of econometrics that are useful, though no specific background is expected. The same thing with game theory. I mean, so my view of economics is that the three most important classes that a person can take are Introduction to Micro. I think that's far and away the most important class for someone who's interested in economics to study, because it gives you the foundation, the conceptual understanding, and everything there is just adding additional infrastructure on top of that foundation. The next most important class is game theory and econometrics. I mean, I kind of stepped out of turn. I think actually the next most important class is actually the econometrics class. Economists think interestingly about data, and econometrics has us think rigorously about identifying the effect, being able to determine what is the causal effect of some particular underlying intervention. Econometrics gives us an important way to think about and to understand data, and to think about understanding the relationships between variables of interest. Econometrics it changes our outlook on the world in a way that's different from other aspects of data analytics and business analytics and so on and so forth. And so I think that's the second most important class for someone to take. The third most important, I think, is game theory. So the game theory course, I think, is super important. That changed my life to take game theory. Matter of fact, I took a game theory class before I took Intro to Micro. It was my window in. I'd found economics from a different discipline. Anyway, in practice, a better understanding can help us think ahead, make better decisions. I mean, obviously, right? Now, though I've given this sort of really heartfelt sales pitch for economics and for economics of entrepreneurship, it's really important to remember that there's other important aspects to bring to bear on a particular problem. So economics is a wonderful framework to think from. It's a powerful framework, and it helps us organize and think about the world in a way that's different than a lot of other disciplines. Nevertheless, it's just one perspective. And so I say keep in mind, while economics may be a very valuable perspective to think about entrepreneurship, it's just one. In practice, you have to think about the economic arguments traded off against other perspectives. Now, in a lot of cases where you'd get results from economics that either don't directly translate to the real world or that seem to be misleading or something, very often there's an error with the assumptions you've made. You're probably applying a model that's actually not up to the task. That can happen for a variety of reasons. It can happen because of an oversight or incompetence of the practitioner. It can also happen just because the problem is maybe a little bit too unwieldy, maybe a little bit too difficult. Maybe there's a lot more things going on than our models are just that a tractable model would be useful to solve. And so for a variety of reasons, it's important to say, hey, this is what economics is telling us. This is the perspective, but there's other considerations. And sometimes we definitely want to bring those to bear on our analysis as well. Generally, the goal of economics is to try to think about really simple theoretical models that help us understand or explore some aspect of the world around us. The idea is we're not trying to model the entire world. We're trying to zoom in on what phenomena is it that we're actually interested in, and then we'll try to abstract away all the complexity that kind of gets in the way. Well, what this does is it leaves us something that's going to zoom in on particularly what it is we're interested in studying. It allows us to get a ceteris paribus result, holding other things constant. But what if other things aren't held constant? Now you've got to reflect on how the model might change once you relax that assumption, right? What about all these other things that actually might matter? If we're assuming that they don't, good, as long as they don't matter. But when the real world complexity starts to matter, now we have to reformulate our model. So the question then is, in practice, well, how does the intuition from our simple model help us understand much more complicated real world situations? I mean, it essentially gives us a starting point, and then it's up to us to tweak and to develop and advance from that starting point. In terms of the course outline, we'll start off thinking about assessing profit potential, assessing opportunity in the market. That'll be the next lecture. We'll think about a value-added analysis. We'll think about Porter's 5 forces, and particularly zooming in on the economics aspects of each of those forces. Then we'll think about the strategic decisions of the entrepreneur. We'll think about pricing. So think about standard pricing. We'll think about advanced pricing, like price discrimination, two-part tariff bundling. We'll think about considerations relevant for advertising, basically trying to shift or trying to influence the demand curve. We'll think about product design and how that sorts and arranges customers relative to our particular offering. We'll think about entry deterrence, game theory. We'll think about network effects and platform markets. We'll think about tacit collusion and antitrust implications. From the standpoint of recognizing, very often when entrepreneurs are entering industries, they could be the victim of collusion that's in antitrust proceedings that's already taking place. For instance, the example of Ben and Jerry's entering the grocery market and then being competed against by Haagen-Dazs, for instance. And so the standpoint is saying, hey, we don't want, first off, we're not going to be advocating for collusion and for running afoul of antitrust regulations. But the other thing is, you need to be aware that this exists, because you could very well be the victim in these circumstances. All right, and then think about economic perspective on practical issues such as thinking about funding, thinking about the business plan, to some extent, thinking about relevant legal issues. I mean, you'd for sure want to consult a business attorney if you were going to launch a new business. Think about intellectual property, think about negotiation, employee compensation, and then alternative sales mechanisms and stuff like auctions. And so think about, these would be some of the things that we'll cover in the course. In terms of the course logistics, well, our lectures are Tuesday, Thursday, typically via YouTube. And so what I'll do is I will link up the videos on Canvas, but I'll also put them in my playlist on YouTube. The reason why I like having my videos for YouTube is because that gives me a way to kind of control those videos a little bit better than putting them into the university system via Canvas or via Zoom or whatever. Also, we don't want to have the synchronous meetings because we have people on different sides of the world. Also, it's nice if you have the ability to come back to the video later on. I mean, otherwise, once you graduate and move on, you'd probably lose access to Canvas, but otherwise, here we have these videos. Lecture notes will be posted on Canvas by 10 a.m. the day of the class. Hey, that's ambitious. I've already got them up already, though. So, office hours, I'll plan on keeping them Tuesday, Thursday, 8 p.m. by appointment, virtually. So arrange via email. Office hours, I'll probably send out a Zoom link. I may change, it kind of depends. So I've got some other things going on, namely training for ultra marathons. So I got off my treadmill last night after running 15 miles in about 2 hours, which is a long time to spend on the treadmill. However, the Michael Jordan doc, episode 5 and 6 was on, so that got me through it. But anyway, in terms of the course readings here, well, there's some background material for the course that might be useful. I've linked these up on Canvas. My view about the readings is you want to look at these as additional supplementary materials. They expound upon what I'm covering in what's in the lecture. They provide greater background. You're not directly responsible for the course readings from the standpoint of exams. So I'm not going to go into the readings and find something that's relatively obscure, arcane, and then put that on the exam. That's not how it works. So the exams are going to follow from lecture and from problem sets. If you feel like you want more, well, the readings are where I'd refer you next to. So that's kind of the idea with the readings. In terms of homework sets, there'll be 2. What I want you to do is try them alone, see where your problems arise, then discuss, clarify with colleagues, ultimately write up your own solutions. These are an individual effort, individual grade. No late homeworks, please, because I'll release the solution minutes after it's due. And then my advice, don't wait for the last minute. You want to do this kind of right away, especially with the exams coming up. You cannot reach the level of proficiency that's necessary for the exam in a short amount of time. So that's sort of a word of warning. Then we will have a pre-business plan project. So this is going to be sort of the overarching project for the class. You'll work in teams. There'll be a presentation. There'll be a paper. This is essentially going to be our take-home final exam. It's a group take-home final exam. The idea is you are coming up with a business idea. You're analyzing it using the ideas from the class. And you have to be discerning. You have to judge what should you apply to your idea and what should you not apply, right? So the idea is not like you've got this interesting idea and you're going to apply everything from the course to that idea. No, that's a bad idea. Some of these ideas don't apply, right? We just kind of talked about how there's different aspects of economics that are applicable in different places, but then there's other things that you might want to consider. And so what I'm looking for you to do is I'm looking for you to come up with an idea, and the analysis of the idea is more important than the idea itself. So spend time thinking about something that's going to be straightforward to analyze. What I'm looking for you to do is make a competent application of the ideas from the class. You want to apply everything that we would assume naturally fits with your idea. Like I'll see the title of your slides, and I'll immediately think of, oh, you should apply these couple topics to this analysis. And so I want to look and see the things that are pretty obvious. Also, you don't want to strain to make applications of things that don't fit. I mean, we'll talk about auctions at the end of the class. For a lot of people, auctions are simply not going to apply to your business idea, so don't talk about auctions, right? Why do I call it a pre-business plan? Well, this isn't a business plan. This is basically the type of analysis you would want to do on your own or with your team before even beginning to write out a formal business plan. You want to do this analysis to look at the economics underpinnings of your example or of your idea to see, is this viable to be able to go forward with? So it's anticipatory of what you would do later on with a business plan. We will like 3-person teams. You can team up yourselves. I'll assign you to partners if you haven't got a team. So what I want you to do is send me your team formation, and then I will match those who haven't got partners. There's 2 components. There's going to be a presentation, 15 minutes. I say during the last day of class. It'll be due the last day of class. You could come in live on Zoom or on YouTube with the 3 of you and make your presentation, record it, and then we'd have it. You could do that, and that is how in the classroom version of the course, people come in, get in front of the class, and they give their presentation live. That's just how it works. Or you could make it in advance. You could make a video. I don't expect professional editing or anything. I do not edit my videos unless I have to insert things here or there, but don't do any type of editing. I view that kind of as a waste of time. However, I do recommend pre-recording your video, so it's good to upload on the particular day. Then there'll be a paper, 8 to 10 pages, due June 26th on Canvas. That can be emailed. This is in lieu of our final exam. It's just due at the time of our final exam. Obviously, you want to be working on that in advance. One submission, 1 presentation, 1 paper per group. In terms of our exams, the first exam is May 28th, and then our second exam, which is non-cumulative, is June 11th. That means it's going to cover material from after May 28th up until June 9th or whatever. No makeup exams, but with a valid excuse, see the syllabus, we could reweight other components of the course accordingly. The way the exams will work is I will give you at least a 48-hour window to take the exam. My thought right now, don't hold me to it, because here's just kind of me thinking while I'm making a video, is probably to open the exam on the 26th and go until the 28th. Probably open this exam on the 9th and go to the 11th, and then head into new material after the exam's over. But that subject, I'm always trying to come up with what's going to be the optimal, and so if I need to re-optimize that, I'll make announcements on Canvas. All right, but the other thing that the exam will do is they're untimed. You'll download a file, you work on it, you'll re-upload the file, or there'll be a multiple choice collection, and you'll work on those, and then you'll send those in. So that's kind of how the exam will work. No time requirements, because apart from you have those 48 hours or whatever to work on it, and there's a variety of reasons for that. All right. In terms of grading, 5% for grading, 5% for participation. Then we have our pre-business plan, which is 20%. The exam 1, 35%. Exam 2, 35%. Problem sets, 5%. There's two problem sets. Each will anticipate each exam with due dates kind of the Tuesday before the Thursday exam. In terms of participation, well, what I'll do, like what I typically do with the classroom version is, like, after we'd introduce something, I would show you a YouTube clip, a video, and then ask you some questions about applying the economics to that clip. We'll think about doing that same thing in the context of discussions in Canvas. And so participation will amount, I'll describe them there, and so those will be kind of on a sort of a weekly or whatever basis. Other participation in terms of like checking that you have viewed the lecture videos, I will post a quiz in advance. You'll want to read that quiz question, and it'll basically ask you, like, what's the timestamp when I said something? So for instance, all right, puppy study break. Here's my puppy, and here's our puppy study break. And so, for instance, the question might be like, when do I talk about the puppy for the puppy study break? And then the way that you'd answer that is you would tell me what's the minute timestamp on YouTube or on the video in Canvas where I talked about the puppy. And so not down to the seconds, but it'd be like the minutes. So suppose it came up at like 15 minutes and 35 seconds, you just tell me 15 minutes. And that's what the question would be asking you to do. It'd be the type of thing where if you know the question is coming, because you'll look at it, you'll see it in advance, and then watch the video, you'll just mark it down when you see it, and then you're good. And so they'll typically be that type of questions rather than content-related questions, because content-related questions, you just kind of look at the slides. But it's really important to watch the videos because this is our course lecture, right? Okay, so introduction, kind of getting into content now. What makes entrepreneurship potentially profitable? Well, our main model that you'd see in Econ 101, the supply and demand model, rests on perfect competition, which isn't obvious that there's going to be profits. There's profits in the short run with perfect competition, zero economic profits in the long run. Interestingly, well, in the long run, we'd expect there's zero economic profits in the monopoly as well. That's in the very long run, because our assumption is that there's no barriers to entry. They're going to last forever. And the threat can come from outside industries. So for instance, like right now, you think, oh, what about the airlines? That's a pretty good, strong oligopoly. There should be economic some of them going bankrupt 10 years ago, but there should be profits in the airline industry, and this should be able to continue forever because people need to get from one place to another. Well, right now there's an interesting threat to airlines, which comes from video conferencing, from Zoom, and from other technologies, which reduces the need for business travel, made more obvious by the pandemic, right? So the idea is, like, even the most stringent barriers to entry might come down in the future if that entire industry is subsumed by another product. And so the idea is, like, even for a monopoly, we might worry that there's not very long run economic profits. Anyway, so how can this help us? Well, economics gives us a nice starting place, right? Place to begin. And so the idea is, let's take this model, and firstly, we'll introduce the model that will revisit competitive markets for a variety of reasons. The first thing is, well, this is what we want our entrepreneur to avoid. Second, this is going to be our first deliberate articulation of assumptions in economics. We want to think carefully about what these assumptions are buying for us, and it is by varying these assumptions where profits are going to come from. So our key assumptions for perfect competition is we have many firms, many buyers, and many consumers, which means that each is insignificant relative to the market. They're going to be price takers. They're selling a homogeneous product, an identical product. They have access to the same technology, the same cost curves. There's free entry and free exit. There's a large number of firms that can potentially enter the market at a cost or at zero cost. And so then this gives rise to a situation where firms are price takers. They're going to look at their cost curve. They're going to bring their marginal cost equal to the market price, which has been determined by the interaction of supply and demand and a variety of other firms operating in the market, and there's going to be zero economic profit in the long run. Well, what if we start varying this? What if we create a situation where there's barriers to entry? Now there's going to be fewer firms, and there's going to be economic profits. Or what if we are able to get away from identical profits or products? Now with some product differentiation, you have small niches that are going to give rise to a situation where firm will have market power over at least some consumers. Or what if we change technology? So this is something that's really interesting, is thinking about how a previously competitive market can become monopolized when one firm gets a superior technology. Other things that are interesting is thinking about the cost curves, the idea that the firms in the market are going to have ability to adjust their own cost curves to the extent that they're not completely determined by the market. The market itself might include a situation where there is just a large fixed cost and a low marginal cost, and there's not a lot the firm can do to change that. So for instance, thinking about an entertainer or a content creator, or thinking about a sports team, there's a large fixed cost associated with even being able to operate in the market. There's low to zero marginal cost with serving an additional consumer. Or thinking about like operating a website, large fixed costs with generating the website, small marginal costs associated with serving an additional consumer. There's not a lot you can do to change that fundamental structure, although it's interesting if you could. What the firm's able to control is, in some sense, like what are the inputs that are being used, what are some of the variable costs, maybe going with different providers for fixed costs or whatever, different capital requirements. But by and large, the firm's going to be able to adjust their cost curves, although not completely. Then there's the demand curve. Firm's not able to adjust the demand curve. That's just in the minds of consumers. And the question is, well, how can the firm learn about their demand curve and then, by changing aspects of the product, adjust the demand for their particular product, hopefully increasing demand, hopefully making it more steep, making it more inelastic. We could talk about a market equilibrium. So in the competitive model, well, firms are going to make zero economic profits in the market equilibrium. Equilibrium is where demand comes together with supply. Or thinking about our single firm equilibrium, it's going to be corresponding to we find our equilibrium quantity corresponding to where the firm's marginal cost equals their marginal revenue, and then going up to find the corresponding price. So the market would be in equilibrium. Market equilibrium basically involves a quantity and a price. In the competitive model, well, there's zero economic profits, and now our goal is like, how do we get away from that? All right, so where do those entrepreneurial profits come from, though? Like, this is an entrepreneurial economics of entrepreneurship class, and so where's our profits going to come from? Well, ideally, you want to find markets that are not in a competitive equilibrium. You want to find places where there are positive economic profits, or generate this. So this amounts to you are able to produce at a lower cost than the rest of the market, and then you have this edge in terms of being able to extract profits. I'll show an example of that in one of the subsequent lectures, or coming up with a situation where you have the ability to increase prices above your costs. So price higher than cost means there's markup. This happens when a firm has market power, when the firm is facing a demand curve or a portion of the demand curve that is downward sloping. So for instance, if you're the only firm in the market, or there's only a few firms in the market, or you're different from the other firms, facing your own niche. And then my observation, as I mentioned before, well, market power can be short-term or long-term depending on entry, and then we're expecting probably not very long-term, right? In the really long future, then there's other things that come into play. Successful entrepreneurs are going to be those that have the ability to identify markets like this, right? Markets where you have a low cost or where you're able to charge a price above marginal cost, and those that have the managerial talent to make the right decisions to extract maximal profits in those markets, right? So part of it is being in the right situation. Part of it is having the ability to be able to capitalize, to be able to maximize that situation, having the managerial talent. So one of the things that's really interesting is watching Shark Tank. So Shark Tank used to be on ABC, used to be an interesting video that I'd watched as sort of a fan of Mark Cuban and Mr. Wonderful, Kevin. And one of the big questions that they'd often have when entrepreneurs would make their pitch is, do you have the ability? Do these entrepreneurs, are these people we want to partner with? Are these entrepreneurs that are going to have the managerial talent to oversee? Because the premise of the show is you've got these entrepreneurs coming before the sharks, and the sharks can invest or choose not to invest or buy part of the company or whatever. And the sharks would then be partnering and having some business relationship with those entrepreneurs. They're not going to be running the product. They might be lending some of their network, some of their connections, but they're not going to be the ones with the day-to-day operation. No, it's going to be the entrepreneurs themselves would be the managers, at least initially. And the question is, are these people the right people for this idea? Is it a good idea? And then do you have the ability to make it work, right? Ultimately, profits are the payoff to this entrepreneurial ability, which involves both of these elements. Other things we want to pay attention to is entrepreneurship and risk. I mean, certainly there's quite a lot of risk often borne by the entrepreneurs and or their families themselves. And so we'll think about that to some extent. And the role of entrepreneurship in society. I mean, entrepreneurship is really important in the context of society and American society in particular. And this entrepreneurial drive is what is very often underlying a lot of the interesting product innovations and advancements that we end up having that end up creating economic value for both the producers but also for the consumers, and creating a situation where we have improvements to human life, which is really important. Our next topic will be thinking about assessing opportunity in the market. So thinking about defining a market, assessing profit opportunities. We'll think about introducing the value-added analysis and Porter's 5 forces, which are going to be important tools for your pre-business project, as well as through the course in general. And then I'll illustrate this with a couple of examples. These are older examples at this point, but they're still interesting from the standpoint of being able to illustrate and bring to life some of the concepts that we'll think about assessing profit opportunity. So Zipcar, and then Seatside Service, which Seatside Service, if you hadn't been aware, was founded by two students graduates of the University of Michigan, which we're proud of. So anyway, hope you enjoy the video. Go ahead and conclude here, and I'll see you in the next one.